Okay, get ready for this one. Science, religion, and the Emperor of Japan. You're probably thinking, what in the world do those three things have in common? Well, what if I told you there's a wild, incredibly ambitious theory out there that tries to tie them all together? We're about to dive into a proposal that aims to solve a very modern problem by rethinking, well, pretty much the entire history of Japan.
So it all kicks off with this single number, less than 1%. That's how many people in Japan identify as Christian. And look, this is a question people have been asking for centuries. Why has Christianity never really taken off there? Well, a new proposal has an answer. And trust me, it's not what you're thinking.
The theory basically says the problem is structural. You see, for centuries, the emperor has been the top public figure for both Shinto and Buddhism. That gave them a solid official place in Japanese culture. But Christianity, it never got that imperial stamp of approval. So it's always been kind of on the outside looking in.
All right, so that brings us to the proposal itself. And let me tell you, it is bold. We're talking about a plan to unify Japan's entire religious landscape.
So, what's the big idea? Here it is. The proposal suggests that the Emperor of Japan should become the official restorer of Christianity. Now, hold on, because this is a really key point. This isn't about getting rid of Shinto or Buddhism. Not at all. It's about adding Christianity into the mix, bringing it under the same umbrella of imperial authority to create this new, unified system.
So you might be asking why the emperor? Well, it all comes down to history. The title Tenno, which means emperor, actually comes from ancient Chinese cosmology. It's linked to the North Star. This role was cemented way back in the 7th century. And it's not just an internal view. Even Western observers centuries ago, like this guy Camphor in the 1600s, looked at the emperor and basically said, yeah, that's their pope. He saw him as the supreme head of both major religions. So this idea of the emperor as a religious unifier, it's been there for a long, long time. It's the whole foundation for this idea.
Okay, but history alone isn't going to cut it. For this to work, you'd need to tweak the theology itself. And this is where things get even more interesting, as we look at a whole new interpretation of self-salvation.
So the core of this new idea is this. The path of self-salvation is to walk with the risen Jesus Christ. Now, I know what you're thinking. Self-salvation in Christianity? That sounds like a contradiction, right? But the key to understanding it, according to this theory, is to look at the crucifixion in a totally new way.
You know the story. The crowd is shouting, "Save yourself. If you're the Son of God, come down from that cross." For them, self-salvation meant a magic trick, an escape. But this theory flips that completely on its head. It says the real act of self-salvation wasn't escaping at all. It was the exact opposite. It was willingly submitting to the formal system, to the law, to death, even while being completely innocent. That act of acceptance, that was the ultimate power move.
So, what happens after the crucifixion? The resurrection. And according to this theory, it changed everything for humanity. Two big things happened. One type of power was sealed off. Let's call it time subjectivity. This is the flashy, miracle stuff, like turning water into wine, literally bending time. That power was tied to Christ's physical body, so it's gone. But, and this is the crucial part, another power was unlocked for everyone. They call this spatial subjectivity. And you can think of it as a kind of universal license, a license to understand, to explore, and even to rebuild the physical universe, the space around us. So in this view, the resurrection becomes this huge theological green light for all of science and technology. Pretty wild, right?
Okay, so we've got this new theological idea, but that phrase self-salvation still feels like a logical knot. How can a self save itself? This is where the theory takes another huge leap, using systems theory to solve the paradox.
So, let's break down the problem. How can a self save itself? I mean, it sounds like a logical paradox, doesn't it? If the self is just one thing, saying it saves itself is like trying to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. It just doesn't compute logically. But what if the self isn't just one thing? The answer, this theory says, comes from a cool concept in biology called autopoiesis. It literally means self-creation. Think about a single living cell. It's a little factory that's constantly making its own parts to keep itself going. It is, by its very nature, a self-sustaining or self-saving system. Suddenly, if you see the self not as a single object but as a dynamic system, the paradox just melts away. So if the self is a system, what are its parts? Well, the theory breaks it down into two selves. First, you've got the private self. That's your inner monologue, your internal world. It's what the slide calls contingency. Then you have the public self. This is who you are when you're interacting with other people, your social self. That's double contingency, because it depends on both you and them. So self-salvation isn't a single event. It's the constant, dynamic dance happening between your private and public selves.
And this is where the theory goes for broke. It claims this two-part pattern, this private/contingency versus public/double contingency, isn't just a psychology thing. It's a fundamental pattern of the universe. Just look at this chart. In theology, you have death, a private event, versus resurrection, a public one. In quantum physics, you have the particle, a private position, versus the wave, a public field of probability. Philosophy, systems theory, it's the same pattern over and over. This is literally an attempt to create a grand unified theory of, well, everything.
All right, now let's take this huge idea and apply it to one of the biggest questions out there: consciousness. How do we get from a physical brain to the science of the mind?
The key concept here is something called emergence, and it's a beautiful idea. It's when you have a bunch of simple things interacting, and suddenly a complex new property just emerges. A single water molecule isn't wet, but a bunch of them together, that's wetness. A single neuron in your brain isn't conscious, but billions of them working together, consciousness emerges. The whole is truly greater than the sum of its parts. The go-to example for this is an ant colony. Think about it. It all starts from the bottom up. Each individual ant is just following a few very simple rules. Follow the pheromone trail, carry the food. But out of all those simple actions, something amazing emerges: a collective intelligence. The colony as a whole can solve complex problems, like finding the best path to a food source. And then, this is the really cool part, that new, higher-level intelligence creates a top-down effect. It actually starts directing what the individual ants do.
Now, if we apply that same bottom-up, top-down model to the brain, we get two different levels of consciousness. First, there's what you could call primary consciousness. This is a basic awareness of the here and now, the remembered present. A lot of animals have this. But then in humans, with our incredibly complex brains, something new emerges: higher order consciousness. This is the big one. It's the ability to be aware that you are aware. It's self-awareness, and it seems to require language and symbols to work.
Okay, we've gone through the theology, systems theory, and even the science of the mind. So now let's land the plane. How does all of this abstract stuff actually get applied? This is where science gets a blessing, especially in AI.
Let's circle back to that key idea from the beginning: opened spatial subjectivity. Remember what that was? It's basically the theological green light, the divine permission slip that humanity got from the resurrection. It's the official authority that makes all our scientific exploration and technological creativity legitimate. It's the universe saying, go for it. You have my blessing to understand and even reshape the world. And a dental crown is a surprisingly perfect example of how this all comes together. So, step 1, an AI scans a real tooth. It gets the shape down perfectly. But the AI has no idea why the tooth is shaped that way. It doesn't know its purpose. That's step 2, where human reason steps in. We know a tooth is for chewing, for speaking. Then, step 3, that spatial subjectivity we talked about, gives us the theological authority to go ahead and remake this thing. And finally, step 4, the AI becomes our partner. With our understanding and that divine permission, it helps us design an artificial tooth that's even better than the original. It's a true partnership between us and our tech, all under this theological framework.
So what is the grand purpose of all this? At its heart, it's about building a bridge. It's a unifying theory, an attempt to reconcile ancient faith and modern reason.
There's this great quote, often linked to Galileo, that says, "Religion and science are not enemies, but different languages that tell the same thing." And that just nails the spirit of this theory. Science becomes the language for explaining how things work, but religion provides the legitimacy. It gives us the why. Why are we allowed to do this? Why does it matter? In this view, they're not fighting anymore. They're two sides of the same coin.
So where does that leave us? I mean, what do you do with a theory this big? Is this a revolutionary new way to look at the world, a brilliant synthesis for our time? Or is it a dangerous idea, blurring the lines between science, faith, and the authority of the state in a way that maybe we shouldn't? It's an incredibly ambitious project, and it leaves us with one heck of a question to think about.